A 31-year-old man was arrested in London yesterday for a possible $2 billion loss. And of course, I'm talking about the UBS story, a rogue trader once again. And I know that you've got immense insights into the story. You've actually been in contact with them, haven't you, Paul?
So what's the difference between a rogue trader and a highly successful, proprietary desk operator? The one makes a loss, the other one makes a profit.
So you only get arrested if you make a loss?
Yes, if you make an unexpected, unauthorized $2 billion trading profit on the trading floor, then you get a bonus and a promotion. If you do the reverse, then you'll...
I'm sure it doesn't work that way, but just tell us about the volatility relative to, the value traded daily relative to the risk that was taken. Yeah, it's totally bizarre.
Because remember, the context here is that banks got so badly beat up during the 2008 crisis because they were engaged in casino-style proprietary trading. They were doing all of this crazy stuff. We had the Jerome Kerviel thing at SocGen. So the banks, particularly in Europe, have been under enormous pressure to clean up their act, make sure that their daily value at risk is reduced, to make sure that they're not using depositors' funds to do any dodgy stuff. And here we go, a London-based UBS trader basically drops $2 billion, US dollars on, we don't know what yet kind of trading.
What the trade was.
Well, if you look at the way markets have been going lately, we were guessing that perhaps what he did is he borrowed $2 billion worth of gold from the Swiss central bank. Then he bet against the euro and the franc and got taken out last week. He used the proceeds to go long SocGen, which fell 50%. And then perhaps, I don't know, he used the proceeds to go long Netflix and the Manchester United IPO. So he got totally killed. And maybe it's his colleagues, geniuses that they are, busy unwinding his positions today. So.
Well, Paul, you could be a scenario planner, absolutely. Okay, so apart from today being interesting because we have actually had unprecedented central bank intervention globally, saying that we're willing to assist the ECB with its woes in terms of funding peripheral Eurozone, it's also the 3rd anniversary of the Lehman Brothers collapse.
Yeah,
today.
No, that was quite fun when Lehman Brothers, do you remember those people carrying their boxes out onto the streets and shouting at the media people, vultures, as they were busy being disbanded? But I mean, it is quite instructive because I don't know whether the announcement from the Fed and all these other central banks was related to the UBS loss, but I think it is instructive that the Lehman Brothers thing was such a disaster. I mean, you know the story. $50 to $100 billion worth of value stuck in clearing accounts because they let that thing go underwater. The consensus view is that it never makes sense to do that, and that must never happen again. So a default like that is totally out, and these kinds of interventions by the central banks appears to be what the market needs in order to get the confidence back, and that's why we're rallying. So I know people like you like to scream and shout about how you can't solve debt problems with more debt. But these kinds of band-aids are very important.
Okay, well, also interesting, I was actually chatting to Stephen Kosov, the CEO of Investec, a little earlier, and this was after the interview, and we're talking about how Iceland is actually recovering after it allowed its banks to fail, after it just took the pain at one go. And it seems that we don't even talk about Iceland anymore the way that we used to. And now what we're seeing is peripheral Eurozone willing to take on the pain, and you've got to weigh those things up. Are you weighing those up, Paul? Do you think that this is the right solution?
Point.
You've got central banks now globally wanting exposure to a country that could possibly default or decide to down the line.
Look, when they say that they're going to apply liquidity and they're going to provide dollar lines and so on, really all it means is that central banks are agreeing that they will work with banks and other financial players to provide overnight collateral if it's required, and they will have low standards with regard to what securities that they get given in order to, make good. And that's just important because, there are lots of ships moving around in the night. You don't want anything banging into anything else. But your other point about Iceland is very interesting because some will say that you have austerity now, you have a total disaster, you lose 20% of your GDP, but you come back faster, is a better way to go than the alternative, which is to, string it out, kick the can down the road, and so on and so forth. I don't know if there is really ever an answer to that because you don't know unless you've got the benefit of 20 years hindsight, which is the better option. All I'm saying is it doesn't make sense to bankrupt your banks in Europe, and it doesn't make sense to, shipwreck your insurers and to have everybody running around like headless chickens trying to keep their monies out of the banks and all that kind of thing. Much better to, wait for the growth to return. These aren't our economies. We sit down at the periphery down here in Africa watching these things move around. As far as I'm concerned, the more that they do to soothe the brows of investors, the better.
Are you feeling soothed today, Paul?
Well, I mean, you know, with the market up so much.
Thank you so much. Paul Theron, a very soothed Paul Theron joining us there for Mad Markets.